Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back to Conversations in the Digital Age. With us is the writer, Michael Shnayerson. Michael Shnayerson has written a marvelous new book, a bestseller entitled The Contender. No, it's not about Marlon Brando, Terry Malloy, I could have been a contender. The Contender is about our governor, Andrew Mark Cuomo, and it is a spellbinder. Michael explores the character of Andrew Cuomo and shows that he is one of the most interesting political figures of our time, even in an election year where he has decided not to be a candidate. Michael, welcome. We're delighted to have you with us.
Thanks, Jim. Good to be here.
Now, congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
And first, I'd like you to tell us something about it. How long did it take you to write it? What inspired you to do it?
Jim, it took forever. It felt that way. I was inspired, funnily enough, back in late 2011. I went to hear David Paterson, the ex-governor, give a talk. He was going to talk about the new governor, Andrew Cuomo, who had just had his first year in office. I thought, this is going to be rich. He's going to really knock the guy the way ex-officials would do. No, he was very admiring of Cuomo, and he really painted him as this sort of master strategist. And I started thinking, interesting character. He'd had a great first year in office, done a lot of things, including marriage equality. And the talk was beginning to be heard that he would run for president. So I thought, let's get a jump on this before he does.
Now, in the past, you'd written a biography of Irwin Shaw. You'd written a biography of Harry Belafonte. You'd written other books, but never involving a political figure. Why the change?
Jim, I look back on all my books and I wonder, why did I do this one or that one? It always at the time just strikes me as the most exciting thing I can imagine. And Cuomo was very exciting to me because once I convinced myself that he had enough accomplished to really be worth a book, then I looked at his backstory. I thought, this is really very compelling. The whole immigrant story of his grandfather and his father becoming governor, Andrew essentially helping as a young man, helping his father become governor. And then the Clinton years in which he becomes the Secretary of HUD at a very young age, goes off, has so much hubris that he then decides to run for governor, gets smashed, marries a Kennedy, divorces a Kennedy. It was just rich with drama. And so I felt very excited to embark on it.
Now, normally when one writes a biography of a living person, one gets to interview that person, and the person supplies facts which are helpful to the biographer. Did that happen here?
Those are in what they call authorized biographies.
You were unauthorized.
This was very much an unauthorized biography. I embarked on it hoping that the governor would cooperate with me. I wrote letters. I actually sent him my 40-page proposal that had gotten me a contract. I wanted to be completely open and transparent about it. He did agree to have a lunch with me, a sort of off-the-record lunch, and basically tried to convince me not to do the book. And then when that didn't work, he turned to political columnist Fred Dicker of the New York Post, a venerable character in the Albany political culture, and said, why don't you write the book about me? Dicker then got a contract. For a while, it looked as if I was up against him. Then Dicker started criticizing the governor for his stands on fracking and gun control. So the governor got rid of him, decided to write his own book. This was quite a journey for me, but it was from really the get-go unauthorized.
Now, did Cuomo at any time offer you the prospect of a collaboration between the two of you? Yeah,
he did early on. That was a thought, that maybe if I worked with him, that he would then introduce me to the Clintons and everyone else. And I thought about this for a little while because he's an imposing guy, and you think, do you really want to spend the next 3 years of your life as his enemy? But my agent and my editor said, no way are you doing that, because you'll be miserable. He'll just, throw you around like a wet towel, and you'll end up with a book you hate if you have any book at all. So thanks to them, they kept my feet to the fire, and I found that over time I could get a lot of people to talk to me. And then, of course, Andrew decided to write his own book.
All Things Possible.
Yeah, well, I guess all things are possible, including that book, which it's hard to imagine, but he did it.
Did it with a collaborator.
Yes, he had a collaborator. Maybe this is unsporting of me, but it basically reads like a bunch of press releases cobbled together. But it came out just before the election of 2014 when he was running for governor again. And I think he felt that's what, a governor running for re-election should do. My book then came out after the election. I had no interest in having it tied up with the, re-election of a governor of New York State. I really saw this book as having a larger scope. It was really about the rise of the American politician, Andrew Cuomo as the quintessential American politician, for all those reasons I mentioned about his backstory, and then about the challenges that he faced when he got into office. He's a
and an American politician who was possibly a presidential candidate.
Well, exactly, yeah. But he, certainly is a very clever strategist, great with the carrots and the sticks. And the way the way he operates really gives you a sense of how to be, for the most part, a very successful politician. The trouble with Andrew, as most observers of Andrew now agree, is it's almost like a Shakespearean flaw. His greatest strength is his greatest flaw, or becomes his undoing, the way we all learned in high school. His toughness, his resolve, his cunning, all get him up the mountain. But then in the end, he pushes too hard, and they undo him.
Dicker's book fell by the wayside in the path of the governor's book,
right,
All Things Possible.
Yeah.
So he never wrote his book.
He never did.
So they're just the two of you out there.
Yeah.
And then normally you write a book, you want to promote it. And one good way to promote it is to go on, say, The Daily Show and talk about your book. And millions of people watch, and maybe some of them will buy. Did Cuomo ever go on The Daily Show? Did he try to promote his book?
He had just one or two appearances. He went to a Barnes & Noble on Union Square. My wife and I went out of curiosity to see what it would be like. We were kept way back in this, not that he knew who we were, on this rope line. He emerged from a black curtain like the Wizard of Oz, and he gave a 6-minute speech, signed a few books, and then disappeared. He's not a guy who likes pressing the flesh or, meeting new people. I mean, in fairness to Andrew, he had a campaign to run. He was running for re-election as governor, and I think he felt that the book just appearing was enough.
But he got a $700,000 advance for the book.
So they say.
And the book was a flop, wasn't it?
So they say,
It didn't even sell 4,000 copies.
Well, all I can say is a good thing the publisher, Harper Collins, went on to publish the sequel to Kill a Mockingbird, because they made their money back on that.
Well, behind them is Murdoch, and I suppose he didn't miss the money.
Well, that's, by the way, an interesting angle, too complex perhaps to get into, but it's interesting that Murdoch owns Harper Collins, the publisher of Andrew's book, and that that Harper Collins chose to pay the governor $700,000. You can't really connect the dots, but you can wonder what the connections are.
Possibly to run for president in 2016, he wanted to roll up a tremendous electoral majority in 2014 when he ran for re-election.
Yes.
He'd gotten more than 60% of the vote when he ran in 2010. But what happened in 2014? Did he roll up that huge majority that he was hoping for?
My memory is getting a little dim on this. I'm not sure he got 60% in 2010.
No, only 54%.
Yeah, 54%. He was aiming for 64%. Why 64% in the re-election? Because his father had gotten 64% in his second campaign for governor, his re-election campaign. And Andrew, was haunted by his father's success, wanted to outdo his father, and really was focused on getting a little more, even if it was 0.5% more, than his father had gotten. That's just a little glimpse into the relationship of father and son.
Well, let's talk about that. How deeply did you get into the relationship between the two, between Mario Cuomo, the introspective philosopher, the poet who, the great orator of the Democratic National Convention in the 1980s, and Andrew, who really doesn't seem like much of an orator. He's more sullen, calculating, different kind of personality, or maybe the same personality minus.
I find it a fascinating relationship. I feel that it is at the core of the book. It's certainly at the core of Andrew Cuomo's his relationship with his father. I didn't know Mario. Most people who knew him found him a very charming, well-read fellow. But I'm pretty convinced from talking to the scores of people I did, including some who knew Andrew when he was younger, that his father was a very tough father. In public, Mr. Charm. In private, very tough on his whole family. Also, simply an absentee father. He just wasn't there much at all.
And he administered, I think you write this, he administered tough love. He expressed love
really did.
By expressing disapproval.
He really did. And Andrew felt pretty beaten down by that. There are actually some very revealing quotes from him in scattered interviews. I went back and got every article written about him for 30 years, and it's actually quite a record, quite a history. And he would sometimes let his guard down and say, my father was, truth be told, very rarely around. And, Mario at one point said, I finally took Andrew to a ball game. I hadn't really seen much of him for 4 years, but Matilda made me. Well, gosh, what does that say? So I feel that Andrew Cuomo, then as a teenager, had sort of a psychological choice. He could either be beaten down by that, or he could become so strong and effective that he earned the admiration of his hard-to-please father.
His father clearly groomed him for a political career in 1982 when he was 25 years old. Andrew was his father's campaign manager.
Indeed, even when Andrew was about 17, he was working for his father in the first couple of campaigns, unsuccessful campaigns, in the 70s, and Andrew would
to become mayor, where he lost to Koch.
He would scamper up the telephone poles and put Cuomo posters, staple them on, and if there are Koch posters, he would tear those down. That was sort of his first role. And then there was
the campaign slogan against Koch: "Vote for Cuomo, not for the homo." Who thought of that one?
A very notorious chapter in the Cuomo history. They both denied for ever after that they hadn't done it. But it's almost inconceivable that someone would have done that, put up hundreds of these posters in Queens without the awareness of the candidate, without Mario's awareness. So, that was. But I mean, that's one unfortunate, unsavory aspect of the two of them working together as father and son in politics. But really, there's a lot that's dramatic and admirable about the way Andrew worked to essentially get his father elected as governor. He was a tireless aide. He was up 24/7. He just he was not going to let his father fail. And it's worth saying that, when that race began in 1982, his father was way behind Koch. I mean, Koch, who had run and won for mayor, really should have been perfectly happy to stay mayor, but he didn't like the idea of Mario becoming governor. So then Koch runs for governor, is immensely popular. Cuomo is losing by 40 points in the polls, and Andrew, really more than anyone else, helped pull him into the governorship.
Well, Koch was popular except upstate when he made the comment that he really didn't want to be governor because there isn't a good Chinese restaurant in Albany. Famous comment, and then he began to decline in the polls. So
he did.
That's how changeable the New York electorate is.
Yeah.
Now, let's just take a look at Andrew's unusual personality. Jeffrey Toobin writes, quote, "He is the uncommon elected official with a trace of misanthropy." Did you find that to be the case?
It certainly seems so from nearly everyone.
Does he not like people?
I think that he has is it misanthropy or is it just a sort of zero-sum thing? He can't share a stage with someone. He can't share the political landscape with someone. He just has to be the winner, and the other person has to be the loser.
Kind of mean-spirited. 9/11, he said Pataki was holding Giuliani's coat, and even Mario repudiated that one.
You know, there's a long history of nasty comments, frankly, that I found going back to his early days trying to get a network of homeless shelters built. Nasty to the people he was trying to get things from. Goes to Washington, works for Clinton at HUD. Boy, there's scores of people at HUD who remember bruising interactions with him.
Including the agency Inspector General.
Yes, oh my God, this woman Susan Gaffney, he basically tried to ride her out of town on a rail, and she was tough. She would not be budged out, but he ends up floating rumors that she's racist, that she, kept people from jobs on the basis of race. I mean, it was really nasty work. Andrew had a sort of henchman with him, Howard Glazer, who was sort of the axe wielder, but it was Andrew, I'm convinced, behind the scenes, making the decision to make this woman's life miserable. And then, as you say, you flash forward to 2002. His Clinton years behind him, he decides to run for governor a first time. That itself shows such amazing hubris that for his first elected office, he would run to be governor. But he felt, he knew the job. He'd seen it from his father's point of view. He'd been there after his father was elected, working as his kind of right-hand guy. Why shouldn't he run for governor, right? But to his astonishment, the polls started going against him because he just emanated this kind of bullying attitude. He was not a guy that you really wanted to have a beer with. And as that...
Particularly opposing a nice guy such as Carl McCall, who was his primary opponent.
Let alone the symbolism of Carl McCall running and, as the first, hopefully first black governor of the state. And so that coat holder comment you mentioned became a real turning point downward in that campaign for Andrew, because he was so frustrated that he himself didn't have a platform as an elected official to climb up after 9/11 and rally the people. He was just Andrew Cuomo, ex-HUD secretary. That he really, I think, became sort of irrationally hostile toward Pataki and Giuliani. And he accused Pataki of just being the guy who held Giuliani's coat during the whole 9/11 experience, which is, people may take nasty cracks at each other in a political race, but there was something about that comment that just went deeper. It was really mean. Further meanness, there came a time when he knew that he was going to lose and McCall was going to win in the primary. And he continued to campaign and caused McCall to continue to spend money so that by the time McCall defeated him in the primary, McCall had no money for the general election. That's right.
Is that an example of the mean-spirited human being we're talking about?
Well, it's actually even a little worse, Jim, because technically Andrew didn't lose the primary. He resigned from the race because as the primary approached, he saw his poll numbers plummeting. And he didn't want the embarrassment of losing by a big margin. So at that point, his campaign people went to Carl McCall's campaign people and said, we'll make a deal. Andrew will step out of the race if you do A, B, C. And it was like, if you promise only to serve one term as governor and all this crazy stuff. McCall's people said, the heck with that.
Right.
And gave him nothing, and he still was forced to resign from the race. Interesting little footnote. The guy who did the negotiating for him with the McCall camp was Bill de Blasio, a young Bill de Blasio, still tall, who, in fact, was one of Andrew's great supporters in that race when very few people were. Fascinating to go from there to where we are today.
So you're touching on an interesting subject because there's another element of his personality, betrayal, because he later seemed to betray de Blasio, who was an early supporter, and he supported de Blasio. And now they're at odds. They've been at odds over
Sure.
tax on the rich to fund pre-K, and they've been at odds on charter schools and
Right.
at odds on other things, and so.
Right.
Andrew goes for the expedient, doesn't he, rather than personal loyalty?
Well, I think that betrayal is just a tool in the arsenal, and if it's necessary, it's necessary. I mean...
And he'll betray Democrats as well as Republicans.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, the list is long. One of the early examples is a guy named Ray Harding, who was the chief of the Liberal Party, quite a figure in New York politics. Long, twisted history between his family and the Cuomos. But anyway, at a pivotal point, when Andrew was running for governor, he turned to Ray Harding and said, "Can you please give me your party's support?" And Harding said, "Well, fine. I just need to know that you're going to see this through to the end, through to the actual election day, not just the primary. Because if you don't, then I won't get the 50,000 votes I need to keep my party legal, essentially. I mean, if you don't, in New York State, have 50,000 votes on your ballot,
next election,
then you're not on the ballot. You essentially don't exist." Andrew swore he would, of course, see it through, and as we've discussed, he dropped out, leaving Ray Harding and the Liberal Party basically non-existent. But this theme of betrayal is consistent.
He kind of has a history of bad personal relationships, doesn't he? Bad relationships with the Kennedys, bad relationships with Bloomberg, others in office.
Well, they're very different kinds of relationships, of course, but yes, I think, well, we can talk about one or the other. I mean, with the Kennedys, of course, he, in about 1988 or 9, was set up on a blind date with Carrie Kennedy, a daughter of Robert Kennedy. And they hit it off immediately. I think they were sort of kindred spirits in a sense. They understood the political world. And I'm sure that they, were soon in love with each other, but there was definitely a kind of political love. Political love as well as romantic love, if you will. It was my sources suggested to me that it was a tough marriage almost from the beginning. Andrew was very controlling, like his father, very absent. Very critical of Carrie for anything from the way she cooked to the clothes she wore to the friends she hung out with. They were in therapy from year one. It was a tough 12 or 13 years for both of them, I suppose, but I think especially for Carrie.
And they had 3 children, twins.
Yes, that's right.
Girls and another girl.
And again, through that 2002 gubernatorial election campaign. Carrie stayed by his side, but had extracted already a promise from him that at the end of that, she was going to get a divorce. They were going to have an amicable divorce. Instead, what happened is he refused after the election to go through with that. He discovered that she had been having a recent affair with a friend of theirs, a mutual friend. He was furious. And he basically just dumped this furious press release onto the media. And it became a carnival for about a week when it could have just been a one-day quiet story. And that was all about anger and revenge.
Let's turn for a moment to corruption. We've seen so much corruption in Albany. I mean, what kind of a place is it with so many figures in the legislature under indictment, or in jail, or resigning in disgrace?
Oh, I know. The list is up to about
Shelley,
30.
Shelley Silver, and actually 24 members of the legislature have been indicted or resigned in disgrace in the last 5 years, all under Cuomo.
Yeah.
It's been called scandalmania.
Right. One of my chapters.
How's he dealt with, that's right. How's he dealt with that?
Well, you can't blame Andrew Cuomo for the corruption of Albany, really. I mean, it's a deep.
Well, you can blame him for not cleaning it up.
Yes, at the end of this story, you can. That's true. When he arrives, he is hardly responsible for what is really a completely rotten culture in which lawmakers take outside work with no accountability and thus are completely compromised by whoever their clients are. When LLCs can give $60,000 contributions one after another with no limit. Essentially, there are no campaign limits.
And a lot of it has gone into his coffers, so he has no particular interest in campaign
that's right.
reform.
In his reelection, that happened. But so all this stuff was there. Andrew knew it, and to his credit, I think in his first year, he tried to clean it up. He passed an ethics law. The trouble was,
and he had a Moreland Commission that he then.
Well, we'll get to that.
We don't have time to get to that. But
okay.
I wanted to ask you a core question:
yes.
Is Andrew Cuomo presidential timber? If not now, then perhaps 4 years from now.
I don't think he is, frankly, Jim. I think there are too many flaws. He's too off-putting. I don't think he'd play well outside of New York. But I think he's got a shot at a curious new possibility, Joe Biden's vice president. If Biden runs, actually Fred Dicker was the one to float this theory the other day. I'd been hearing it a while myself. It's not inconceivable that he would choose Cuomo as his vice presidential candidate. They like each other. Biden has publicly called Andrew the best governor in America.
And he may be the Democrats' Donald Trump. So,
yes.
Michael Shnayerson, I wish we could go on. We have so much more that we could cover, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Thank you so much for coming by.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
And thank you for coming by. Please tune in next week for more Conversations in the Digital Age. Visit our website at www.digitalage.org. I'm Jim Zirin. All the best.